In a forsaken graveyard of New England, no trees of wood take root. Instead, they rise from human bone, ribs twisting into skeletal branches, skulls swaying like pale, hollow fruit. Among them moves the gravekeeper, an ancient shadow, silently tending his garden of the damned. Each soul of the unfortunate, once sown, blossoms into another tree of bone, feeding the forest that should never have been. Nen Pafsi. The fog of New England clung to the earth like a burial shroud, veiling the narrow path that wound up the hill where the old cemetery lay. Michael Hale, a man in his 40s, walked slowly, one hand gripping a weathered leather notebook. An archaeologist by trade, he had little patience for folklore. To him, this graveyard was nothing more than a forgotten relic of the 17th century. Before arriving, Michael had heard the villagers' strange warnings. They told him never to set foot on the hill after sunset. They whispered of pale figures gliding through the mist, of groans rising from beneath the earth, of trees that grew not from wood but from bone. He had laughed, dismissing their words as superstition woven from fear. But the suffocating silence here gnawed at his certainty. At the crest of the hill, Michael stopped before a gate of blackened iron, rusted and twisted. The carvings of crossed bones were nearly worn away. A stone tablet bore a fading Latin inscription, Hic silentis locantur. Here, the silent still speak. He pressed his hand against the gate, the chill bit like metal drawn straight from ice. Inside stretched a garden of the dead. Tombstones leaned and fractured, their inscriptions lost to moss. Weeds choked the soil, yet here and there, pale shapes jutted from the earth like limestone shards. Michael crouched and realized they were fragments of bone, disturbingly clean, as though placed there deliberately rather than left to decay beneath the soil. Michael opened his notebook and began to record everything. The shape of graves, the weathered symbols, even the position of the bones. Then came a creak, sharp, deliberate. Michael's head snapped up. Across the cemetery, near the largest tomb, stood a figure. The fading light sketched a gaunt old man with a hunched back, a long coat trailing the ground, and a rusted spade in his hand. He did not move, yet his sunken eyes seemed fixed on Michael from within the hollow dark of their sockets. Michael swallowed hard. He had not expected a caretaker. Relief should have come, but instead, a cold shiver clawed its way down his spine. The old man's body did not shift, yet the creak came again, like a gate closing of its own accord. Michael turned. The iron gate stood shut behind him, silent and immovable, as if it had never opened at all. Ah! Michael instinctively stepped back as the old man advanced. His black coat dragged across the wet grass, with a sound like bones grinding together. The hollows of his eyes were deep and sunken, his stare pressing against Michael's chest, as if trying to pierce straight through him. "Night has fallen," the man rasped, his voice corroded like rusted iron. "This place does not belong to the living." Michael forced himself to remain steady. He raised the worn leather notebook, his tone firm. "I'm an archaeologist. I'm here only to survey these old graves. I'll cause no trouble." A crooked smile bent the old man's face. "Survey?" he echoed, tapping the head of his spade against the ground 3 times. The sound reverberated hollow and strange, not the thud of solid earth, but the echo of a void beneath. This soil does not hold history. It feeds. A chill ran through Michael, but pride in his profession pushed him forward. "If you are the caretaker, then surely you understand the archaeological value of this place." Some of these stones date back to the 17th century, perhaps even earlier. The old man bowed his head, his trembling hand stroking the shaft of the spade. My name is Elias. I have tended this ground longer than anyone remembers. Those stones tell you nothing. What truly lives here does not rest above the earth. The wind stirred, carrying a rustling like countless hands scratching beneath the soil. Michael froze, his heart hammering. Through the grass, he glimpsed pale shapes, finger bones, writhing upward, retreating just as quickly. He blinked, and they were gone. Only the grass swayed. Elias watched him still, his lips moving as though in prayer. You should not remain past dark. After sunset, the soil hungers. Michael drew a sharp breath, etching the words into memory, though his rational mind refused surrender. I need only one night of study. Tomorrow morning, if you wish, I'll be gone. Elias regarded him in silence, then let out a low, broken laugh that cracked like brittle bone. One night, more than enough for the earth to notice you. He turned and shuffled deeper among the graves, his shadow dissolving into the leaning stones. Michael thought to call after him, but his throat tightened, no sound emerging. The headstones around him seemed to lean closer, their shadows tangling together like skeletal arms reaching outward. By the time the last light drained from the sky, Michael stood alone, the leather notebook open in his shaking hands. In the suffocating dark, only the scratch of his pen on paper could be heard. Yet beneath the damp soil, another sound stirred, an endless rasping, as though hundreds of skeletons breathed in rhythm with him. Noir. Night fell over New England as swiftly as if some unseen hand had snuffed out a vast lantern in the sky. The cemetery drowned beneath a heavy curtain of darkness, lit only by a pale crescent moon, its glow spilling across the crooked stones. Michael stood frozen, pen halted above the page. A strange silence pressed down. No insects, no owls, only the restless wind spiraling through ancient crypts. Then the sound returned. At first it was no more than the patter of pebbles, but it grew, grinding, splintering, the brittle crack of something breaking far beneath the soil. Michael staggered back, eyes locked on the grass at his feet. The earth swelled upward, as though something beneath clawed for release. A sharp snap split the night. From the ground, a shard of bone jutted skyward, pale and glistening under the moonlight. Another followed, curved like a branch. Horror clamped Michael's chest as he realized. Ribs. The branches bent and twisted, joints snapping into place, forming the grotesque outline of a tree clawing its way toward the sky. Not one, dozens. All around him, the earth quivered. Skulls burst from the grass like fruit. Hollow eyes turned toward him. The graveyard writhed, birthing bone trees that groaned as they rose, their skeletal limbs grinding together with a sickening chorus. Michael's breath caught as he stumbled back toward the largest tomb. In the weak moonlight, he saw what made it worse. Many of the trees still clung to tatters of clothing, shoelaces, scraps of fabric, even the glint of a wristwatch. These were not relics of centuries past. They were the remains of the missing. The wind howled, carrying with it a sound more dreadful than any gale. The broken murmur of countless voices. Michael strained to listen, heart pounding, and heard them. Help us! Release us! The earth devours. His legs trembled, but terror chained his eyes to the sight before him. The bone forest climbed higher, trunks weaving into a pale lattice, skulls dangling like rotten fruit, clacking against one another in the cold air. Some rose 10 feet high, their limbs creaking as though eager to embrace him. The cemetery had become a living garden of the damned. Michael turned to flee, but the ground at his back split open too, bone shoots sprouting and snapping shut around him. He was trapped, hemmed in by dozens of reaching trunks. A shudder cut down his spine as one tree nearby bent toward him. Its ribs groaned, splintering as they spread open like fingers ready to seize their prey. The air thickened with the stench of damp earth and the sickly sweetness of rotting flesh. Michael gagged, bile rising in his throat. With a strangled cry, he hurled himself toward the massive tomb at the cemetery's heart. Its stone door hung ajar beneath the moonlight, waiting. He didn't hesitate. He plunged inside and slammed the heavy slab shut behind him. Darkness swallowed him whole. The silence pressed so deep he could hear only the hammering of his own blood. And then, from the depths of the crypt, a whisper unfurled, long and serpentine. "You have entered the garden." Michael stiffened, ice coursing through his veins. In that moment he understood. He was no longer an observer. He was part of the soil now. Me, a sea. Inside the stone tomb, the darkness was thick as a drowned sea. Michael pressed his back against the heavy door, breath ragged, ears still echoing with the brittle crack of bones outside. The air was rank with mold and the faint iron tang of dried blood, choking his lungs until he thought he might suffocate. He flicked on his flashlight. Its trembling beam cut across damp stone walls slick with moss. But it was not only stone. The surface was carved over and over, a mad tapestry of names etched in desperate haste, hundreds of them, clawed in Latin, Old English, and symbols Michael had never seen before. They sprawled like curses left behind by those who vanished. At the tomb's far end stood an altar. Upon it lay a cracked ceramic vessel brimming with fragments of bone, pale and granular like salt. From the floor, black roots wormed upward, coiling around the remains, feeding on them. Michael staggered back, chilled with realization. The earth here did not merely devour, it cultivated. A rasping voice rose from the shadows behind him. "You've seen it now." Michael spun, light quivering across Elias, the gravekeeper, stepping forth from the dark. He still clutched his rusted spade, his coat dragging low, but the beam revealed something worse. His skin was fissured with cracks, in places peeling back to expose the bone beneath. Beneath that wrinkled husk, Elias was little more than another living tree of bone. What are you?" Michael stammered. Elias chuckled, the sound sharp as snapping ribs. "I am only the sour. You saw the garden outside. The soil thirsts for souls. It devours the dead, but without a hand to tend them, they would wither. I feed them. I watch over them." Michael trembled, yet curiosity forced the words from him. "And the missing? They are your trees as well." Elias inclined his head slowly. "The wanderers, the sinners, even the curious, like you. Any who set foot upon this land become seed for the garden. That is the covenant. The earth grants me existence, and in return I plant. Call me monster if you will. I have only kept my vow." Michael backed away, heart pounding. I can't stay here." Elias advanced, his shadow stretching across the walls, carved with the names of the dead. You are already here. The gate behind you will never open again. The earth has recognized you, and it craves you for its next tree. The flashlight shook in Michael's grip, its beam catching Elias's face. His eyes were no longer eyes at all, only gaping hollows. From his mouth writhed slender bone roots, squirming like parasites. Elias raised the spade, its handle blackened, its blade glinting cold. "I do not kill you," he whispered. "I plant you." The ground beneath Michael split apart, jagged cracks yawning wide. Skeletal hands thrust up, clutching at his ankles. He screamed, struggling, but the grip only tightened, dragging him inch by inch toward the soil. In that frantic instant, clarity struck him. He had only two paths: surrender to the earth's hunger, or shatter this vile covenant, whatever price it demanded, even if it cost his own life. And Elias stood above him, smiling faintly, the way a farmer smiles as the seed finally sinks into the waiting ground. "Nah. Ingen, umaya." Michael screamed, wrenching at his legs as skeletal hands clamped tighter, dragging him down. The pull tore his skin open, blood spilling into the soil, hungrily swallowed as if poured onto smoldering ash. Despair crushed his chest, suffocating every breath. "No, I don't belong here." He clawed at the stone wall, desperate to resist the earth's hunger. Elias only watched, hollow eyes sinking deeper into shadow, his voice calm and resonant, like a litany whispered at the end of time. "You belong to the garden the moment you set foot here. Your blood will enrich the soil. Your bones will bloom into new branches. Do not resist. Let the earth claim you." Michael's frantic gaze darted to the altar. The fractured clay urn lay there, brimming with bone dust, its surface tangled in writhing black roots that trembled like starving veins. A thought pierced his panic. If the garden's existence was bound to that vessel, breaking it might sever the pact. With the last of his strength, he lunged, clutching a jagged stone from the tomb wall. The skeletal hands gripped harder, pulling him waist-deep into the ground, but Michael roared, hurling the rock with all his fury at the urn. It shattered with a violent crack. Fragments flew, bone dust burst into the air like a pale storm. From beneath the earth rose a shriek, thousands of voices howling as one, an unholy choir of souls torn free. The skeletal hands around him convulsed, then loosened their grip. Elias's roar split the chamber, his voice breaking for the first time. "You fool! You do not understand what you've done." The tomb quaked. The ceiling split, stones raining down. Michael scrambled free, dragging himself toward the sealed door. His hand pressed against the cold slab, then froze. His fingers were no longer flesh, but bare white bone, the skin shriveled and peeling away. He looked down in horror. His legs too were changing, skin splitting open, bones stretching outward like gnarled roots. The price of breaking the covenant was not freedom, but transformation. A seed, stronger, hungrier, was taking root. Elias writhed in the collapsing dark, yet laughter rasped from his withering throat. "Did you think you escaped? No. You have only taken my place." Michael's scream curdled into the cracking of bone. His body bent and warped, limbs driving deep into the soil, veins hardening into root, joints twisting into branches. His mind dimmed, hollowed, until only the hunger remained, spreading, devouring, eternal. By dawn, the graveyard stood silent, cloaked in mist. The bone trees towered motionless, their pale branches gleaming like ivory. At the garden's heart rose a new trunk, its limbs stark white, and from them dangled a broken pen and a blood-stained notebook. The Garden of Bone had claimed another, and it would never cease to grow. Known. In 2011, on my 21st birthday, I took it upon myself to go backpacking through the Canadian mountains all on my own. I had gone backpacking and camping many times before, but never solo. I wanted this birthday's significance to be rooted in the fact that I had challenged the great outdoors completely by myself. On my third day out, I reached my destination. It was an old farmhouse sitting alone in an overgrown field out in the middle of nowhere. I had discovered it earlier on Google Earth and was eager to check it out before heading back. In addition to a first aid kit, a compass, and a utility knife, I carried a Smith & Wesson Governor revolver with 6 shots. It was the crown jewel of my father's collection, and he had loaned it to me for protection while I was out in the woods. He made sure I had practiced with it several times and knew exactly how to use it before I left. As I approached the farmhouse, I was glad I had the weapon, because I wasn't entirely sure the place was abandoned. Every ground floor window was boarded up, and a faded plastic pinwheel spun lazily in the dirt by the front door. I walked up the front steps and, feeling somewhat foolish, I knocked. When no one answered, I circled the house. An ancient, rusty fire escape dangled from one of the upstairs windows, and an old refrigerator lay on its side among the tall grass. Back at the front, I tried the knob. Rusty, but with some force I managed to turn it, and the door creaked open. I was just about to step inside when I felt the sensation of eyes on me. Out by the tree line, I saw what appeared to be a man with a long gray beard staring directly at me. Instantly, I felt guilty and nervous. I waved at him with one hand, the other resting on the revolver at my belt. "Hi there, is this your place? I'm sorry, I'll leave." For 10 long seconds, the man just stared. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back into the trees. That unsettled me more than if he had yelled. The last thing I wanted was to go back into the woods knowing he was somewhere out there. So, I stepped inside the farmhouse and shut the door behind me. I dragged a dusty stool in front of the door so I'd hear it crash if anyone tried to come in. For the next hour, I explored the dark rooms, always glancing out the windows for another glimpse of a man. As night fell, my nerves kept me from leaving. Instead, I climbed a narrow staircase to the attic, locked the door behind me, set up my gas lantern, and unrolled my sleeping bag. After a light dinner, I wrote in my journal, turned off the lantern, and tried to sleep. That's when I heard it, faint creaking on the stairs. My eyes shot open. I grabbed my flashlight and gun, aiming them both at the attic door. The footsteps grew louder, climbing the staircase without hesitation. "Who's there?" I shouted. "If I'm trespassing, I leave. Just don't open the door. I have a gun." The steps didn't stop. Soon they reached the landing. The doorknob rattled. "Don't try it. I told you I have a gun. Just tell me who you are." There was a pause. and then the knob jiggled harder. "Stop! I'll shoot!" I forced myself to count to 5. The jiggling continued. "Last chance!" I counted again, my heart pounding, then fired 2 shots low through the door, aiming for the legs of whoever was there. Silence. No cry of pain, no body falling down the stairs. Just silence. I unlocked the door and cracked it open, my gun ready. Nothing. No one. Not even a drop of blood. Panicking, I slammed it shut, locked it again, and shoved an old rusty armchair in front of it. The rest of the night was a blur of dozing off, waking up, gripping my revolver, and waiting for dawn. When sunlight finally poured in, I gathered my things, climbed out the attic window, and escaped down the fire escape. I was about 20 steps away from the house when I turned back. Looking down at me from the attic window was the bearded old man. I raised my revolver, aiming at him as a warning not to follow, then sprinted into the woods without looking back. 2 years later, in the summer of 2013, I returned with 4 of my friends. I showed them the bullet holes still lodged in the attic door. I still go camping every now and then, but I always make sure I bring my handgun. Because out there in the wilderness, you never know who might be watching you from the shadows. Felt like something was watching you, following you, even when no one was there. For me, that feeling wasn't just paranoia. It became terrifyingly real, and the memories of it still keep me awake at night. I do admit this story has a very fine line between bizarre and abusive, but overall, it's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. In all honesty, I've had a lot of creepy encounters, known a lot of normal people that ended up doing very bad things. Sometimes I almost feel like I'm cursed to make friends with rough edges. This whole situation started when I was a sophomore in high school. I showed up to school one day and noticed a new boy in my class. I was your atypical goth girl, and this guy was a teenage bad boy dream. Piercings, leather jacket, reading some sort of obscure novel. I was hooked at first sight. I introduced myself, and soon enough, we were dating. He will henceforth be referred to as X for the rest of the story. Now for a little background. I was brought up in an alcoholic parent's home. There were many times I was living by myself or with a friend because one of my parents was in the hospital. Despite the chaos in my family life, I still managed to go to school every day and pull in decent enough grades. After one time too many, however, I was left for 2+ months living alone. Instead of coming home to an empty house, I asked X if I could live with him since he was closer to school. He and his parents happily welcomed me into their home. At this point in the relationship, maybe 5 months in, we were phasing out of the puppy love stage, and I was starting to notice some very serious red flags. X was very mental and started cutting regularly. His parents were very heavy drug users. There would be times I would try talking to X, and he would literally stare off into space and not notice my existence. He was never mean or abusive towards me, but I could definitely tell something was unhooking in him. When we started living together, it started to become very evident something was very, very wrong. He started to tell me he thought he was possessed by demons and couldn't control himself. We both spiraled into moderate drug use. I started skipping school, and he started seeing more of these demons. In all truth, I hadn't realized what a home I had dug myself into by living with him. One night, We ended up falling asleep after smoking a bong and watching a movie. It was a big house, and we were living in the garden-level basement, 2 or so floors below his parents and siblings. Around midnight, I was woken up by the most frightening screech I'd ever heard. X was right next to me in bed, contorting, convulsing, and screaming bloody murder. At first, I thought it was just a seizure. I've seen friends have seizures before, and I didn't interfere, only looking for one of our cell phones to call 911. As I got up out of the bed, he looked me dead in the eyes. The blood drained from my veins. I've never seen such hate. Everything seemed to happen in flashes from there. He never broke eye contact as he slowly rose from the bed. It almost looked as if he was a marionette on a set of strings, pulled up with sunken shoulders. The half-smile formed on his face as his body twitched. He started walking towards me. I can't describe how terrified I was, cornered in the room opposite to the door. I felt my ears swell and ring. He started screeching at me, coming within a centimeter of my face, never breaking his gaze. I started pushing him, yelling at him to cut it out, but it was like trying to push away a stone statue. He would not move. He finally started talking, ranting about the demon, and not making a single word of sense. As bizarre as it was, I knew he was having some sort of mental episode. I truly did fear for my life, and knew I needed to escape. Suddenly, I felt as if I was sucked back into the moment, and my senses were incredibly acute. I noticed the window we had cracked open earlier. I pushed the window back, punched through the screen, and climbed out as he stood silently staring after me. I'm pretty sure I stayed outside for an hour, hyperventilating, before I decided to ring the doorbell. One of his parents answered, very confused, and set me up with a blanket on the couch on the first floor, with no questions asked. In the morning, X came up and acted as if nothing had happened. No matter how much I pestered him about it, it was as if it had been a bad dream. I made arrangements to stay with another friend that day, and broke up with X about a week after, once I was actually able to face him again. Sometimes I wonder if it had been some sort of sick joke to get me out of his house, or out of the relationship. But I watched unshocked in the years after as he fell into severe drug abuse and mental illness. At one point, I went to a school counselor and told them how worried I was for him, but it only made him hold a grudge against me. After everything that happened, I really started to feel sorry for him, and sort of weirdly forgave him for what he did. He tried contacting me a few times after everything that happened, but as the years went by, I heard less and less. Last I heard, he was addicted to meth and living on the streets. I'm 23 years old, and as a child, my family and I would spend all 3 months of summer at my grandpa's huge farmhouse in Tirana, Albania, which is around 7 miles from the nearest town. Apart from an old computer, my grandparents have a complete lack of recent technology, so I often found myself exploring woods, taking long, relaxing walks, which I liked because it gave me time to think. And a lot of the time I went hunting with my dad and grandpa in search of coyotes and boxers, which would kill our livestock. Just to be more clear, I'd been taught to shoot for years at this point, and I found myself to be quite a good shot. One particular day, it was around 1 p.m., bored out of my mind, I decided to take my grandpa's 2 German shepherds for a walk. Eventually, we got to one of my favorite places, a crystal clear river around 7 feet wide. Walking, I noticed a tall man on the other side of the river with his back turned to me. He was wearing a pair of black jeans and a hoodie, which I found odd considering it's around 80 degrees this time of year. Even more concerning is that there's usually nobody around for at least a few miles. Despite this, I spoke to him and asked if he was lost or if he needed any directions. He ignored me completely, not even acknowledging I was there. I continued to walk and had eventually made some distance from this person. Then I heard him crossing the river and come across to the side I was standing on. I turned around to see him just standing there with his eyes wide open, almost as if he was surprised to see me. Trying not to think much of this, I continued walking, only to notice that he was following me at a slightly faster pace. I turned around and said, "Do you want something, sir?" I said this in confidence simply because I had my grandpa's 2 dogs with me. He began to walk much faster towards me. Now I was genuinely scared. I knew nothing of this man, who he was, what he wanted, if he was armed. So I ran to avoid leading him directly to my grandpa's farmhouse. I cut through a small woodland, at which point I thought I'd lost him and continued to make my way back home. I spoke nothing of this to my parents. That same night, I went ahead to my room and decided to call it a night. At around 2 a.m., I was woken with the sound of leaves being stepped on right outside the sliding door to my room. Slightly alarmed, I decided not to get worried, hoping it was just one of the dogs. So I lay back down, facing away from the door. A few seconds later, I saw this shadow creep up at my door. I was frozen in pure shock. Slowly turning around, I saw the figure of a man. I rushed to switch on the lamp by the side of my bed and quickly picked up my grandpa's old Carcano rifle. Trying to sound intimidating, I told the guy to get away in a rather squeamish voice. He stood there for a few seconds and then quickly pushed my sliding door to the side. Knowing full well I didn't have it in me to shoot him, I screamed for my dad as loud as I could. He continued to stare at me until my dad barged the door open and he ran into the woodland. In anger, my dad took the rifle out of my hands and started shooting into the night in hopes of one of the rounds catching him. The next morning, the police were called, but could do nothing about it apart from file a report. I didn't know if it was the man from the river or not, so again, I ended up saying nothing. I thought if I did, I could get an innocent man arrested. Around 2 weeks later, I still hadn't gotten over what had happened. On that day's paper, we saw an article titled 18-year-old boy murdered in his sleep. I translated this as best as I could from Albanian. At the bottom of the article, there was a picture of the man I saw at the river, with the same surprised expression, as if he had no idea what was going on. My parents didn't let me fully read the article, knowing it would just make me feel worse. To this day, I feel 2 things: regret that I didn't pull the trigger, and guilt knowing that if I had, that boy would still be alive today. His figure still haunts me. A weekend retreat to a quaint forest cabin curdles into a waking nightmare when subtle tapping on the window grows into a siege by something that leaves dead offerings, clawed trees, and footprints that start outside and end at the bed. I rent an old-fashioned cabin for the weekend. 1 room, 1 fireplace, 1 promise, quiet. The road in is a thread through black pines. Rain clouds squat low, and the air has that clean, metallic sharpness of a place that doesn't like to be disturbed. Inside, aged boards, mismatched chairs, a stone hearth so old it has its own smell of ash and winter. The place feels safe, in the way forgotten places sometimes do. I unpack, cook, listen to the roof, take the night's first fingers of rain. The cabin space is a single breath. Bed, kitchenette, a small couch, curtains drawn tight against the dark. By the time the storm settles to a soft patter, the cabin hums with white noise. I lie down. The glow of my phone fades. Sleep takes me quickly. It isn't a dream that pulls me up. It's a feeling, primitive, sour in the gut, like stepping onto a stair that isn't there. My eyes open to a room that looks exactly as I left it, but the air is wrong. Thicker. Charged. The rain shushes the windows, even and soothing. No footsteps. No voices. But I am certain, bone-deep certain, that I am being watched from somewhere just beyond the glass. No. Da. A faint, rhythmic tap, but then another. Not random patter, intervals, like a finger testing glass for a response. I sit up and the mattress whispers. The tapping stops. I lift my phone. Its cold light cuts a pale tunnel across floorboards silvery with condensation. I move, bare feet on cold wood, checking the couch, the kitchenette, the fireplace throat. Silence swallows everything. I go to the back window, the one that faces the trees. The curtain is heavy, damp at the hem. I pinch the fabric and draw it an inch. Rain warps the world outside into a dark river. The forest is a wall of vertical shadows. I almost close it. Then my light skates over the floorboards below the sill and catches a trail of wet, thin as breath, beading into half-moons of mud. Barefoot prints. Small. Human.tow. They arc from the door to the window and stall beneath the curtain, then vanish as if the last step never needed the floor. I freeze. The room shrinks. Water ticks from the curtain onto the wood, but the curtain is dry above my hand. I whisper a laugh that doesn't sound like me. I open the door to the covered stoop, intending to prove myself wrong. Rain drifts sideways, a fine, needling mist. There, on the welcome mat, lies a small black crow, arranged with impossible neatness. Neck broken, wings folded, head tilted toward the door. Not fallen, placed. Beyond the stoop, the mud churns to a slurry of boot prints from earlier travelers. But cutting across them, clearly visible, is a single path of naked feet coming from the tree line, stopping at my step, and turning back again. The spacing is wrong. Too close together. As if the walker were leaning forward the entire time. I step back inside and close the door quietly, like that matters. I can't help it. I look through a different window toward the nearest pine. The phone's light reaches only so far, but it finds gouges in the bark, long and parallel, the kind that sink into the living wood. Sap beads in pale tears. There are more on the second tree and the third, each set higher than my reach. Whatever marked them was tall, or climbed. A draft moves through the cabin, as if the building let out a breath. No. I sit on the bed and watch the windows. Time folds. The room is a circle of waiting. Then, barely audible under the rain, I hear a murmur. Not quite language. Like someone practicing a word they can't shape. Something leans against the back window. The pane fogs. A soft flower blooming from the center. In the fog, a handprint appears. Long palm, narrow fingers. No holes, no ridges, too smooth. It presses, slides an inch down the glass, and vanishes when the condensation runs. I don't move for the rest of the night. The tapping never returns. The feeling never leaves. Nin. At dawn, the rain is only a memory in the smell of wet wood. I tell the owner casually, like a funny story I am not part of. He doesn't blink. He nods, as if I've mentioned the color of the curtains. "A few months back," he says, "someone got 3 knocks, heavy ones. Shook the door, didn't open. Next morning, the frame was splintered like it was tested by a sledge. Nobody called the police. Folks get nervous, you know." He smiles without teeth. "I don't like spooking customers." He doesn't ask if I slept well. He doesn't ask if I'm staying. Oh, Tennessee. Daylight feels like a lie, but I use it. I circle the cabin. The crow is gone. In the mud at the forest's lip, bare footprints multiply. Some fresh, some softened by rain. They circle the cabin, avoid the door, double back on themselves like someone pacing a line they can't cross. Farther in, I find a birch scarred with claw marks, 5 deep cuts tapering upward. Beside them, faint in the lichen, is what looks like a palm pressed into bark. Not a hand. Hands have structure. This print is wide, soft-edged, as if pressed by something that learned the shape, but not the bone. A low branch holds a strip of fabric, damp and colorless, knotted in a loop. It flutters once. The air smells briefly of iron. Back inside, I notice the oddities. A horseshoe nailed upside down above the door. A thin line of salt crusted along the windowsill, interrupted only where the curtain brushes. A small, empty nail hole on the frame, as if something once hung there and was taken down. I'm suddenly aware that the cabin is less a home than a trap with rules. And at some point, recently, someone moved a piece. Ow. Ah. Clouds stack again by late afternoon. The forest goes dark by degrees, and with it, my nerve. I decide, stupidly, not to leave. I drag the couch to face the back window. I keep my phone plugged in. I tell myself I'll just watch. The rain begins anew, patient and sure. As if in answer, the first tap arrives. Gentle, deliberate. The next one comes exactly as my heart rate settles. I count the seconds between. They are even. I hold the curtain closed with 2 fingers. The fabric feels colder than the room. The tapping stops. A minute passes. 2. Don't know. Then... knock. It comes from the door. Heavy, resonant. A fist that knows my name. Knock. The frame trembles. Dust loosens in the ceiling seam. Knock. High. The last one is a command. Wood fibers cry. A hairline crack opens by the latch. I don't breathe. The door stops shaking. The silence swells. A whisper rises at the back window, clearer now, as if the speaker is closer to language. See. The curtain pulses inward once, as if someone exhaled against it from the other side. Wah, one four. I understand, too late, that the knocks are not to be answered. They are a distraction. The thing at the door is not the thing at the window. Or maybe it is, moving faster than I can count. Something drips onto my wrist. I look up. The curtain hem is wet. It shouldn't be. There is no leak. The water smells of pine sap and something old. The fabric pulls against my fingers, gently, like a dog testing a leash. The whisper again behind the glass, no longer a suggestion but a shape. Look. I do not. Nemo. Time slows into a tight coil. The knocks don't return. Instead, there's a scraping across the porch, like claws testing grain. A second handprint flowers in fog on the pane, higher than the first. Then a third, upside down, as if something hung there, looking in. I stare at the corner of the curtain and count my breaths. At some point, I notice something I shouldn't. The faintest damp toe prints on the floorboards, a foot's worth from the bed. They're moving toward the window, not away. The wood around them is dry. The prints themselves glisten as if they were made just now by a foot that isn't here. I don't move. I don't blink. I wait for dawn to peel the night away. The light comes as a mercy without warmth. The porch is empty. The door looks normal until you see the hairline cracks radiating from the latch like frost. The salt line on the back sill is parted in a neat crescent gap. In the break, a single pine needle sits upright as if planted. Above the window, tucked into the frame where the wall meets the trim, I find a knot of black hair. Not fur, not human exactly, coarse, slightly damp, and smelling faintly of smoke. I gather my things with hands that won't stop shaking. No, I know. I tell the owner I'm leaving a day early. He nods like men nod at weather. Some places, he says lightly, don't like to be looked at. He runs a thumb along the counter, collecting a line of sawdust. You didn't open the curtain, did you? I don't answer. He smiles at the non-answer. Good, he says, and turns to a tool drawer. You should go before the road gets slick. As I leave, I see it. A small drawstring pouch of salt hanging behind his office door, and a window where the curtain rod is bolted to the studs. The path out is a tunnel of wet green. In the rearview mirror, the cabin shrinks to a square of shadow, then to a vertical line between trees. Just before the bend takes it away, the back curtain. The one I held, the one that wanted my hand, lifts in the still air, a small, tidy movement, as if fingers have pinched the fabric and released it. I do not stop. I can pretend it was animals. I can invent a prankster with time and patience and a bag of crows. I can tell myself the prints were mine, smeared by rain, and the hair a broom's lost bristle. But know what I felt in that first second of waking. The sense of a mind outside mine, pressed to the glass, practicing a word. I know what the owner didn't have to say, and I know this most of all. The tapping wasn't the wind. The knocks weren't an invitation. They were an instruction. The thing at the glass doesn't want to come in. It wants you to look. And if I had drawn the curtain 3 seconds earlier, I would not be here to tell you that. Later, at home, rain beads on my apartment window. In the fog, my hand leaves behind. A second handprint appears beside mine. Long palm, narrow fingers, sliding down the glass before the condensation runs. Then, nothing. Only my own breath and the quiet knock of a neighbor's door somewhere down the hall. Tap, dot, dot. Husky. It was just past midnight at the gas station. Those late shifts always felt like being alone on a forgotten island. Just me, the constant hum of the coolers, the faint smell of old coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzing above like tired insects. It was 12:15 when I first noticed him. Through the front window, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Tall, thin, moving slowly along the side of the building. Not toward the front door, but sliding past, like he was deliberately avoiding the light. His head tilted downward, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. I couldn't make out his face. The street lamp behind him left him in silhouette. Now, I've worked here long enough to know plenty of people use our lot as a shortcut. Sometimes to get to the bar, sometimes just passing through. But something about this man. He didn't look lost. He didn't look drunk. He looked like he knew exactly where he was going, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know where that was. He disappeared along the building's side wall. I told myself to stop staring, to mind my own business. But after a few minutes I realized something. He hadn't reappeared. If he'd kept walking, I should have seen him cross into the open lot beyond the building. That's when I heard it. Tap, 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 tap. Soft, deliberate, coming from the back of the store. I froze, the sound echoing faintly in the empty shop. Slowly, I stepped out from behind the counter, each footstep on the tile sounding too loud. I passed the aisles of snack shelves, their shadows stretching unnaturally long under the white light. The tapping grew louder as I approached the back hallway. Tap, tap, tap. It stopped the moment I reached the heavy metal back door. I stared at it, my breath shallow. The air felt colder here, as if something on the other side was drawing the warmth away. I glanced up at the security camera monitor behind the counter, but the back camera feed was nothing but static. I reached out and gently touched the door handle. Ice cold. Some part of me screamed not to open it, but another part, the curious, stupid part, told me I needed to know. I turned the lock and slowly pushed the door open. The alley behind the station was pitch black, the kind of dark where your eyes don't adjust, they just surrender. The smell of damp concrete and something sour drifted in. No one was there. I stepped out, my shoes crunching on gravel, my ears strained for sound. That's when I saw it. By the dumpster, a faint movement, like fabric shifting. I took a step closer, squinting into the shadows. And then, a face appeared. Not fully, just enough for the pale curve of a cheek and one unblinking eye to catch the faint glow from the street lamp far away. He was pressed against the wall, still as a corpse, watching me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the threshold, and slammed the door shut. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. The rest of the night, I couldn't shake the thought he hadn't just been passing through. He'd been waiting. And I still don't know if I interrupted whatever he was planning, or if he's still out there, waiting for a night when I'm not quick enough to close that door. Nyodon.